Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's IQM training event. It would be really helpful before we get started if people can put their videos on. Thank you, Sheena. I can see you've done that already. If everyone else can put videos on, it just helps me so that I can see the people behind the screens. I can tell that you can hear me okay because you're following the instructions, so thank you very much. My name is Sarah Linari, and I am a Senior Assessor and Ambassador for IQM. And I'm delighted to be here with you this afternoon to give you really what is a brief overview of elements 5 and 6 to support you with your completion of the SER document. I'm hoping maybe that you have your SER with you so that you can annotate as we go along, but if not, it's really not a problem. You can take notes, and don't forget this session is being recorded, so you can always come back to it. So welcome everybody. There will be an opportunity for questions after each section, so please feel free to ask questions. There's no judgment whatsoever, and I'm sure if you're thinking something, there'll be others in this meeting who are thinking the same as you. Thank you to those who are just saying their cameras aren't working properly. That's absolutely fine, so don't worry about that. Again, no judgment from me. It's just nice to see a few of the faces as I'm talking through. Okay, so let's get started. We will move on, first of all, to talk through the elements in detail. But before we do that, I would like to just talk to you, for those who aren't already aware or those who may be interested, about our Centre of Excellence and Cluster Group programme. So our centres of excellence are our schools where the inclusive practice has been recognised as excellent, where the school has been very successful on the Inclusive School Award assessment, and they achieve the recognition as a centre of excellence. Centre of excellence can actually be achieved on your first IQM assessment. On your SER document, you will see a little box, actually a section that says to tick if you are interested in Centre of Excellence status. So once you hear a little bit more now about the programme itself and you look into it, if it is something you feel that you are interested in and you feel that you will be successful at, don't hesitate to fill that in. I know schools tend to err on the side of caution and aren't great about shouting about themselves and recognising themselves, but really the IQM is an opportunity to celebrate. So if you feel you would like to be a Centre of Excellence and part of the programme, then definitely make sure you put that on the form. The cluster programme is a unique programme of sharing of best practice across the IQM family of schools. It's unique in that we bring together schools from different phases, from different backgrounds. So we have special schools, we have PRUs, alternative provisions, primary schools, secondary schools, nursery schools. We bring all those like-minded, inclusive schools and places together to share best practice. And we meet 3 times a year. And each meeting is actually hosted by one of our centres of excellence or flagship schools. And it allows the opportunity for colleagues to tour the provision. And we have presentations on best practice. It's very much a collegiate, collaborative approach within an environment where everyone is on the same page with that inclusion agenda. And like I said before, you get the opportunity to work with other settings that you wouldn't necessarily have the opportunity to work with out of authority, out of your trust, out of your direct local area. So it is a fantastic programme, and those schools who take part in that programme are very positive in terms of the feedback about the meetings and the general involvement because of the networking opportunities and links that they've established. So if you feel that you have inclusive practice to share and that practice is embedded across the school, then you should look into the Centre of Excellence. It does involve an annual review of provision because our Centres of Excellence commit to that continuous practice improvement, the continuous improvement, the evolution and enhancement of inclusive practice. So it is an extra commitment, and it is a 3-year-long programme with the 3 annual reviews within that. The reviews itself look at a more refined target system, so it's 3 or 4 smart targets. It's not the SER document to be completed each time. It is a different set of paperwork. So if you are interested, you can find out more by contacting us, or you can ask your assessor on the assessment day as well. So thank you very much. Has anybody got any questions about Centre of Excellence or the cluster programmes specifically? Brilliant. Well, we'll move on to what you're all here for today, and that is looking at elements 5 and 6 of the SER documentation. Sarah has asked a question there about the costs of that. So what we'll do is, rather than me go through that all now, we'll put that either into the chat or send out information directly to those interested after this meeting. So thank you for that, Sarah, because obviously there is an annual cost involved in the Centre of Excellence commitment. Okay, so element 5 in the SER document is all about assessment. And when we talk about assessment, we mean the holistic sense of assessment, so academic assessment, but also the assessment of individual needs, of SEND needs, specific groups of learners, or mental health and wellbeing needs. So it's very much assessment of the cohorts and then schools' response to how that data is used and analysed. Again, as we've done in previous sessions, what we've done is we've picked out what we feel are the key words for each of the criterion within that element to help you really hone in on what that criterion is asking you. So I want to unpick each of the criterion now in more detail and just give you some ideas of the things that you can incorporate into your SER document. But as always, there is no expectation that you have to write, full sentences, full paragraphs. We are happy for just bullet points to give us a flavour of what you're about, to give us a flavour of what you're doing. So it can be very short bullet points, and it's just the opportunity for you to share with us what you're doing about assessment to assess your pupils' needs. So if we take a look first of all at 5.1, the keyword within 5.1 or keywords is very much about the identification of gaps. And this is, we want to know what you're doing to analyse data, so how you're using summative data, external assessment data, prior data, how you're using any data that you have about your cohorts to inform practice. So how you use data to identify any gaps in learning, any gaps in emotional well-being, any gaps in knowledge or skills, and how that data is best utilised to then support the children moving forward. So within this, you could include your summative data programme, how you input data, how you track the data, how you analyse it. You could talk about your marking and feedback policy itself. You could talk about pupil progress meetings or any meetings where you discuss individual pupils or groups of pupils. It could be where you look at your academic progress. But within this, like I said before, you could bring in assessment that you use that may look at social and emotional needs. There are lots of different programs now in schools that do look at emotional well-being, and they do have robust frameworks that allow school practitioners to identify areas of need. So please put all of that into this section. I'll repeat it, but this is very much a holistic sense of assessment, not just academic. For 5.2, the key word that we have picked out is the word tracking. Within this section, we just want you to bullet point which systems you have in place to track progress. And that could be, for example, if you use NFER assessments or past papers, phonics assessments, anything that you use, any of those systems that you have in place, you can refer to it within here and how you track that data on a half-termly basis, a termly basis. You can also incorporate the systems that you use to hold that information, whether that be an online platform or pupil progress records. So whatever systems you have in place in school to record and track progress data, this is the place to put it. As for all of these criterion, the evidence is very much linked to what you're talking about in the comment section. So the comment is a brief overview, bullet point of the provision, and then the evidence is where the assessor would find evidence to support your evaluation. So for example, if you have talked about a marking and feedback policy, the evidence location would be school website, see policy. If you have talked about an online data platform, the evidence would be the school's data platform. So I hope that makes sense. For 5.3, the key word here is parents and carers and guardians. So this looks very much at how the school shares assessment data and information with families, because obviously schools hold a lot of information about pupils. And if you're truly working in partnership with parents and carers, then that information will be shared to support the individuals. This is where you can talk about your school reporting systems, parents' evenings. It may be where you bring in information about EHCP reviews, SEND reviews, communication methodology that you have in school to communicate with parents. So again, just an overview of what you have in school to share and impart that information. And again, how that information is then used. Do you gain feedback from the parents as well and their insights? Do you give them the opportunity to reflect? For 5.4, we have picked out the growth mindset aspect. And this doesn't necessarily mean growth mindset explicitly. So have you got growth mindset displays up across the school, or do you use that terminology every day? It's the wider sense of the growth mindset, that resilience and that reflection on learning. So what opportunities do you provide in school for the children to reflect on their learning and learn from the learning, learn from mistakes? You might have a really clear set of terminology, you might have a clear program for that. So this is an opportunity to talk about that. But it could be as simple as reflections in lesson at the end, or whole school assemblies where you talk about resilience. You could link it back to your core values. So it's very much dependent on how you promote that sense of the growth mindset across your school. For criterion 5.5, we've highlighted the word learners, and learners refer to the children or young people within your setting, whatever age they may be. And it is about their understanding and how the practitioners check their understanding, assess their understanding to address misconceptions. So this very much is looking at that assessment of learning, the formative assessment that can take place, the reflective practice within the classroom, or the reflective practice within the curriculum. It's an opportunity for you to talk about approaches to feedback. For example, at the moment, a lot of schools have moved towards live marking, and that verbal feedback within lessons. Exit tickets, if you do exit tickets at the end of a session, how is that information used to inform the next lesson? How are support staff deployed within your classroom or across the school in response to the learner's understanding, and when you have checked that? It could also be that you have a clear strategy for lesson structure, in that retrieval is very much a part of that. A lot of schools base their teaching and learning on the Rosenshine's principles, and a lot of that is about that recall and prior knowledge and how you build on that. So how do you use assessment to constantly check that the children are learning, that they have understood, and that then they are in a position to build on that? Evidence for this will be seen on the assessment day itself, but also in pupils' exercise books. You will see it within lessons themselves, and also in discussions with the class teachers and key members of staff. For 5.6, We hone in on the individual needs of the cohorts. So we look at how teachers develop a clear analysis of need and how those discussions inform the support for individual needs. So this again could be looking at pupil progress meetings where you discuss all data of individual children. It could be looking at interventions and the evaluation of interventions, your provision mapping. It could be looking at, again, formative assessment in the lesson. So how do you identify any children who need additional support? So very flexible in how you interpret that as a school, but with the clear understanding that you're looking at the individual learners' needs and how you are analysing what they need to inform provision. 5.7 looks more closely within the learning at the learning intention. We call them lots of different things in different settings. In this sense, it's called the learning intention. You might call it the objective. But how do you share what the objective of the lesson is with the children and the success criteria? How are success criteria shared with pupils so that the learners can acquire new skills and knowledge so that they can really take ownership for their learning? So here we're looking at obviously the lesson structure. We're looking at evidence within lessons of how the teacher is explicitly sharing the learning intention, how the success criteria is referred to within a lesson. This might be evidence within schemes of work, on PowerPoint, and again, it will be looking at the adaptation of that. So if you're all working towards a shared learning goal, how is that then broken down for key individuals to support all in achieving the learning objective? 5.8, for this criterion, we've looked at the word personal because it's very much about that personalisation of the targets, personalisation of the assessment data so that pupils can actually articulate their own learning journey and the progress that they've made. At IQM, obviously being inclusive, we love celebrating individual successes. And this criterion looks at that individual level, looking at those individual pupils and their targets. And again, this could be looked at through a SEND point of view, but we're talking all pupils because we're looking at every group of learners, every child within this. In terms of articulating the journey, it might be that you have roadmaps of the curriculum that you refer to. Pupils may have individual targets, personal targets. They may even be involved in the target setting process. So however this looks in your setting, here is the opportunity for you to demonstrate how the targets are personalised and then how you encourage the learners to take ownership for their own individual learning journey. Again, retrieval practice can be part of that. So how do they take their prior learning and how do they move forward with it? How do they build upon it? 5.9 is looking at that peer support. So how are the learners encouraged to support each other in learning? And this is as simple as talking about the use of, think, pair, share. So talk partners, how are they utilised within a class? How do you use the, I do, we do, you do approach to ensure that the learning is modelled, but then they're given an opportunity to work with their peers before they're expected to work on something independently. For this, you could also incorporate the aspect of peer assessment as well. How do you give the pupils opportunities to reflect on each other's work, to comment on each other's work? It's very much that collaborative approach to learning and looking at it from a peer support perspective for the children. And again, this can be evidenced through the marking and feedback policy, pupils' exercise books. It'll come up in conversations with the children. It will be reflected in your lesson observations. So it's very much about the children working together. That is element 5 in a nutshell. And I know I've gone through that very quickly and with brief points, but it's just to give you a flavour really of the kind of activities that you can mention, or the aspects of your provision that you can detail within this section. Has anybody got any questions about element 5 at this point? So thinking in particular about element 5, are there any questions? Okay, we've had a question submitted via email. Oh, and this is a great question because somebody's asked, what if the learners cannot access the national curriculum and you use different assessment tools? That is absolutely great because it shows that you're using appropriate assessment tools for individual pupils. So for example, if your children if you use pivots to assess those children who cannot access the national curriculum, bring in the pivot assessments. That is a celebration for us that you do have different tools that you use for the different cohorts. So feel free to include everything within that section. Are there any other questions about assessment? No? If you think of something later on, again, there will be an opportunity at the end for questions, so don't panic. And you can type it into the chat. I'll try and keep an eye on the chat as well when we pause for questions. So if you do have a question, feel free to type it in as well. Thank you.